Welcome to the DSO Dilemma. You'll meet my special guest friend and nacho sponsor, Brannon Moncrief of McLerran and Associates soon. Before we get started, I want to share with you, if you're looking for an associate to unlock more freedom, free time with your family, and most of all, fewer hygiene checks, Dentist Job Connect would love to help. Just text HIRE to 215-798-9897. One of our amazing Dentist Job Connect clients hired her associate dentist recently in Chicago, Dr. Maggie Augustin, as enjoying not practicing alone. I want to share with you a quick video. If you're a group practice who has multiple associates, like my friend Dr. Arash, you are always in need of associates in case one moves across the country, in case you find another practice to buy. So let's watch in on Arash and his experience with Dentist Job Connect.
All right, hi. Well, I'm Arash Ahmadnia, and I am here to talk about Dentist Job Connect and what a fantastic resource it's been for me and my company, Access Dental Services, especially for us being in Southwest Missouri. It is not a place that we've easily been able to recruit, but over the last 3 years, we have found a total of 4 doctors that we have coming on board. We're interviewing 4 more right now, and I believe 2 of them are actually coming out to Missouri in May. So that's not bad for 8 doctors in 3 years, when I think it took us usually about 18 months, almost 2 years. The last open position we had, it took us almost 2 years to fill before Dentist Job Connect. So.
And I'm Brandon Labe. I'm one of Arash's new associates. Dentist Job Connect was great for me with finding different opportunities. It's very well laid out, and it kind of tells you all the different benefits of each job opportunity. And it's very easy to use. You kind of can search by like location and everything, and it just made it very simple and easy to find different opportunities that suited my needs. And I'm very lucky to have found Arash.
So as you can see, Dentist Job Connect is committed to bonding dental, pun intended, dentists together. If we can help you, please visit us at Dentist Job Connect. So I'm excited to welcome to the Dental Nachos TV stage, Brannon Moncrief. Brannon, can start your video. Thanks for being with us here tonight. You are a regular on Dental Nachos TV. We're going to talk about the DSO dilemma. Should I sell my practice to a DSO? Debunking DSO myths. Top 5 mistakes dentists make when pursuing a DSO affiliation. I'm happy to see we have people in the Zoom room, so this webinar is for you. Please ask questions in the Q&A and we can answer them. But before we launch into this, Brannon, I always like, what is a day in the life of Brannon Moncrief like? You get up every day and you help dentists realize their dreams, hopefully avoid screams. So just tell us a little bit about that.
It's busy, stressful, and rewarding, all 3. So I'm Brannon Moncrief, Principal CEO of McLerran and Associates, and we do sell-side advisory for dentists nationwide. So whether you're looking to sell your practice to a private buyer, or you're a large practice owner, maybe a multi-site, multi-doctor, multi-million-dollar revenue practice, we do sell-side representation for doctors that are looking to go down the DSO private equity path. So I like to say our job is to educate and empower dentists to make good decisions when it comes to monetizing their business.
I like that a lot. And if I just ask you, we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I like little snapshots. I like little snippets. So I'm a dentist, right? I've been a dentist for 20 years. If you said to me, Paul, what's like a nacho brainer? What should I do to take care of my teeth? I'd be like, go to the dentist to get your teeth cleaned 2 to 3 times a year. People who do that have less pain, literally and figuratively. We catch problems when they're smaller. Your habits become ones of preventative rather than reactive care. So if I ask you, I see we have sellers who I know watching in, I see we have medium-aged dentists. Someone just said to you, hey, Brandon, give me like just a take-home tip for selling my dental practice. This is the first second I've thought about it. Paul got me to this webinar. I follow Dental Nachos and Dentist Job Connect. What kind of take-home snippet would you give them?
I think it's really 3 things. 1, plan early, right? Oftentimes we get the call, the day after a dentist wishes they sold their practice.
Yeah.
And at that point, we're dealing with however the asset looks. But if we start planning early, we can help coach you and reverse engineer the outcome that you're looking to achieve. 2, you got to build a strong team of advisors. You need a good sell-side advisor. You need a good dental CPA, a good dental attorney, maybe a coach or a consultant if there's things that you want to do to your practice to get it prepared to go to market. years in advance. And then 3, know your EBITDA. You need to know your EBITDA. If you're a business owner that's 2 years into business, 20 years into business, if you're 10 years from exit or a year from exit, you need to understand what drives value and marketability when it's time to exit. And you need to know your EBITDA, because whether you're selling to a private buyer or selling to a DSO, cash flow is king. That's what really drives value from a practice acquisition standpoint.
I love that. Those are 3 great take-home tips. Your dentist is going to like me better now, Brandon, because you're going to go in with your family more often. And now if we just break those down before we start with our first question, what is the difference if you just were on a game show with brokers, right? And they said, give me the answer of the difference between EBITDA and seller discretionary earnings. Because we hear this EBITDA, people say, hey, Paul, I got $1 million practice. I got $500,000 in EBITDA. I go, probably not, right? Probably not. So maybe just, there is a lot of confusing terms out there. Break that down, difference between EBITDA or seller discretionary earnings and what those mean to you.
So when you talk about valuation through the lens of a private buyer, they're looking at net cash flow before doctor compensation and debt service. So in that scenario, we're talking about revenue minus overhead without accounting for paying the doctor a market wage. So if it's a 1 doctor practice, whatever you're going to take home at the end of the day would be discretionary cash flow. And from a private buyer perspective, practices are typically going to trade for, somewhere in the range of 2 to 2.5 times discretionary cash flow. Yeah. From an EBITDA perspective, you're really talking about absentee owner profit. So you've got to factor in revenue minus overhead minus a market wage for the doctor. So we get that call a lot that you described, Paul, where somebody says, hey, Brandon, I've got a practice with $1 million top line revenue and my EBITDA is 400,000. And that's almost impossible. Yeah. So the first question I ask is, well, did you pay yourself to do the dentistry? Oh, no, I have to pay myself. Yeah. Now let's look at 30% of your collections. Let's back that out of that 400 grand. And what's left over is EBITDA. And from a DSO private equity perspective, practices trade through the lens of a multiple of EBITDA, somewhere in the range of 6 to 10 times EBITDA, depending on the unique characteristics of that practice.
I really like that. Actually, one of the, I love all my sponsors and people who help me and I talk to, but that is one of the best descriptions, because the description you gave of EBITDA had an emotional plus for owners. I'm an owner. It was absentee owner profit. And I go, man, Brandon, it would be nice if I could make profit by not being there. And I think that is a great way to look at it. So let's start with our first question for our audience. People are watching in now. People are on Facebook Live. People will be watching this recording. So one of the top questions in dentistry, should I sell my practice to a DSO? Tell us your thoughts.
I think the answer is maybe, right? This is obviously a lightning rod topic. I mean, anytime it comes up in the group, there's people, swearing by it and swearing at it. So it really depends on, how is your practice engineered financially, combined with what is your why, right? So if your practice does less than, let's say, 1.5 million in revenue and $300,000 in EBITDA, if it's smaller than that, economically speaking, it's not going to be super compelling to sell to a DSO comparative to selling to a private buyer. Practices with revenue under 1.5 million, oftentimes the DSO valuation and the private buyer valuation are relatively close. They might be, 100, maybe 200 grand apart. So it's compelling, but not super compelling comparative to when you're talking about a larger multi-million-dollar rev practice with even 600, 800, $1 million. That practice is going to be harder to sell to a private buyer, because you got to find somebody that's confident, competent enough to take on a practice of that caliber and can access the debt they need to acquire it. So the buyer pool's smaller when practices cross that revenue mark of about 1.5 million, certainly 2 million, and the valuation disparity is massive. A practice of that size in the private buyer world might trade for 1.6, 1.8 million on a good day, whereas in the DSO world, that practice might trade for $3 or $4 million. So a massive delta in valuation. So economically speaking, the larger the practice is, the more profitable it is, the higher the EBITDA, the larger the delta between the private buyer world and the DSO world. And for that reason alone, it can be compelling when the cash at close that you'd sell your practice to a DSO for is, 50, 100% higher than the cash at close that a buyer would pay. And then you have an equity component with a wealth creation opportunity on top of that. Economically speaking, that could make it compelling to look at the DSO option as opposed to selling to a private buyer. And then it comes down to why, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it an exit strategy? You're planning to exit your business, whether that be immediately or 3 to 5, 10 years from now? Are you looking for administrative help because you either want to take a step back and, pull back from the business to get a little bit better work-life balance, or are you looking to lean in and continue to scale your business and grow your business, and you want a partner to help you do that? A lot of times people think that going the DSO route is just an avenue for stepping back, but it can also be an avenue for leaning in and continue to scale your business. So it really comes down to evaluating, one, what's your why? And two, what does this look like economically from a private buyer perspective and a DSO perspective? And then from there, we talk about options. And
you've broken this down in a simplistic way. I might want my team to take a lot of notes here, because this is the stuff we really need. It's really, should you sell to your practice to a DSO 101? Because basically you're saying, what is the EBITDA in your opinion? So I don't know if you've heard, there's a very advanced study about Trident, Brannon, that only 4 out of 5 dentists agree on Trident. One dentist, we could not convert him, whoever he or she was. So I know there might be some differences amongst brokers, but from what I heard, the EBITDA that moves the needle towards the DSO is that $500,000 plus. Is that what you would say?
yeah, I mean, once EBITDA crosses $500,000, assuming all the other aspects of the practice are attractive and make it marketable in the DSO space, economically speaking, it gets really compelling to go the DSO route compared to the private buyer route.
And then if we're under that, in the $300,000 range, the economics could be similar in both. Is that
You're on the bubble. You're on the bubble. If you're in the 1.2 million in revenue to 1.5 million in revenue, you're definitely kind of on the bubble.
The thing I want to bring up is, we might wind up reinforcing some of your other topics and the debunking ones, but I am a dentist, right? I am a dentist. I graduated in 2002, grew practices, multiple associates, specialists. I know what it feels like to run a dental practice. I was there yesterday, right? And this is what I want you to bring to light for our audience. Let's go back to this $300,000 bubble time, and someone's listening saying, I'm not sure if I want to sell to a private practice or a DSO. Share with me what their life's going to look like. How long do they have to stay? Who do they have to interact with? Because I think this, as a dentist, I believe is the biggest moment when people are thinking about this that really often pushes them in one direction or the other. So tell us about that.
Private buyer versus DSO sales are very different, especially as it pertains to the transition. In a private practice sale, you can potentially exit the business immediately. You are more than likely going to exit the business, whether you want to or not, within 12 to 24 months, especially if your buyer, it's going to be their sole practice and their sole source of income. Because if it's not currently a 2-doctor practice, if there's not enough production, if there's not enough cash flow there to support 2 doctors, the writing's on the wall that, you're going to need to leave sooner rather than later. And the other thing I'll say about selling to a private buyer is you will typically see more change in your business post-sale if you sell to a private buyer comparative to selling to a DSO, because a private buyer is going to be there every day. It's their baby. And they may not get along with some of your staff. They may have different ideas about, how to treatment plan and how to approach clinical dentistry. They might not like the carpet or the paint or the equipment you're using.
Right.
So you're actually far more likely to see substantial change if you sell to a private buyer comparative to a DSO. Now, a DSO is going to need and want you there long term. So minimum 3 years commitment, ideally 5-year post-closing commitment, if you want to maximize demand, marketability, and value. Now, that commitment will come with a lot of autonomy. You'll have pure clinical autonomy. DSOs, good DSOs, not all DSOs. There are bad, stupid DSOs and private equity firms out there. Those are not the ones that I'm talking about.
What I'd like us to, what's interesting, Brandon, dentists are a very unique group. we always kind of think about the negative, what could go wrong. Dental implants, they work out 9 out of 10 times. They're one of the best healthcare inventions of the past 50 years. I love them, but whenever I bring them up on nachos, some dentist says, well, one time one of my patients' implants failed. So what I'd actually like to set the tone with for this conversation is, we're going to assume that both the private practice buyer and the DSO are in the good to great category. And what you said before is, hire a team to rule out the bad ones, because it's almost an exercise in wasted words to have a discussion about how things are going to go with a bad DSO or a bad private practice buyer. Because I'm going to tell you how they're going to go, not well. They're going to go not well, right? But in this regard, you're basically setting us up for, if you're partnering or selling to the right person or entity, now you can go back on why they're not going to change too much or why there's going to be less change. I just wanted to kind of set that tone.
I appreciate that. You know, in especially in the DSO world, when we talk about DSO practice sales, it's literally like the opposite of Vegas, right? With Vegas, you only hear about when people win. In the DSO world, you only hear about the nightmares, right? You don't hear about the really, really great stories, because those dentists have made a ton of money and they're sitting on a beach in Hawaii somewhere. They don't need to get on Facebook and bitch about the bad experience that they have. So I like the fact that we're talking about good DSOs that partner with good clinicians, good practices, and we should just support them behind the veil administratively. They allow for pure clinical autonomy. They allow for a ton of operational autonomy. They don't want your business to change. Change is the conduit to failure. If they change your business radically, they just paid you millions of dollars, a huge premium compared to what a private buyer pays. They are taking the risk that they are burning their investment to the ground. Doctor turnover, staff turnover is the Achilles heel of success post-sale for a DSO. So they want everything to be same or better from the doctor viewpoint, the staff viewpoint, and the patient experience viewpoint. The reality is that they don't have to make a lot of change to make a lot of money. By aggregating a large number of businesses and selling them for a higher multiple, by utilizing leverage to do so, and by utilizing economies of scale, they're going to naturally make a lot of money, even if your business just stays flat for the period that they own it. So you're going to have a 3 to 5 year vested interest in the business. You're going to retain clinical autonomy. You're going to have a lot of operational autonomy. If things are going well, the DSO is likely going to say, hey, call me if and when you need me. If
That's what I want to pause you to interject. And I want, Brandon and I are here hanging out. My awesome team members are here. They're going to share things in chat. I would like you to go into the chat right now. Do me a favor. Would you help me? And say, are you a practice owner, associate, dental student, or other dentisting human? Practice owner, associate. You can do it. I know. I see all of you here. I know many of you. Okay, good job. Other dentisting human. Go into the chat, and I'll start calling out people's name. B, thanks, B. Practice owner. C, H, I don't want to violate Zoom HIPAA here, Brandon. But one of the things I just want to continue to focus on so people hear this is, the DSO doesn't want you to change, because this makes their whole business model vulnerable, forcing you to change. Did I say that accurately?
So most of the buyers that we work with, they're not interested in buying fixer-uppers. They're not in the business of buying underperforming businesses and then completely reinventing the wheel. There's a handful of DSOs out there that do that. But most of our clients own elite practices, and they're looking to partner with a DSO that's going to allow them pure clinical autonomy and a lot of operational autonomy. Those DSOs that buy those types of assets do very little to change them. They are going to say, hey, call me if you need me, if everything's going well. Now, if the business is not performing well, they're your partner. They're going to lean in and say, all right, something's broken, something's not working. We need to work together to formulate a game plan, to get the train back on the tracks. It's kind of funny. A lot of our clients are worried that some big corporate overlord is going to be telling them what to do on a daily basis, and they don't want that. And in reality, if we're talking about what is your why, and your why is that you want administrative and operational help, there are fewer DSOs that are set up in a way where they're very, very involved in your business on the day-to-day operationally, compared to, the DSOs that are. So if a component of your why is that you want help operationally, there are actually fewer buyers out there that are prepared to be heavily involved in your business on a
Yeah.
daily basis.
And I like what you're sharing, Brandon. I want to ask this because I asked this in a fun way. We saw Dr. Arash, my Job Connect client, share. We help him hire associates. He has 5 or 6 practices. He might have 15 associates. If he needs another associate, he actually directly texts me, say, I got to go on Dentist Job Connect, right? And I got to promote one. Let's say you now sell to a DSO that has 100 offices, right? 100 offices. I don't know if you consider it to be medium-sized DSO, but 100
Medium.
offices,
Yeah.
medium. And let's just say you say, I sold to this DSO. We're partners. It's me, Brandon. And my associate just told me they're moving across the country because their wife got into a residency program. My office manager told me our practice management software is out of date. My hygienist just told me they're going on maternity leave. And I say, it all happened. Today's the day. I need the help of my DSO. How are they helping? What are they doing? Can you count on them? To me, that would be the stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet that I would need to really show up on the stat sheet for my sanity.
Absolutely. Every DSO has a varying level of infrastructure. And if you really want operational support, you need to evaluate that as you're doing diligence on buyers. That's why it's so important to create optionality and entertain interest from multiple buyers, because they're all going to look and feel different. So if you are looking for help from an operational perspective, evaluating what does your infrastructure look like? Where's your corporate headquarters? How many employees do you have that are in the seat to support me on a daily basis? Can you help with staff recruitment and training? Can you help with associate recruitment and training? Do you have an IT department? Most DSOs are going to fulfill all of those functions to where your office manager picks up the phone. They have one line of contact at the DSO, and they're like, here's what happened today. Here's what's on fire. I need help putting out these fires. And a good DSO partner is going to pick up that call and bring the resources to bear to put those fires out more quickly and at less cost than you could do on your own.
They need like a red phone. This is just on a mild, I don't know if you saw the show Night Agent, but it's actually a very good one. I hope they come back with season 2. But it's basically a guy who sits in like the White House waiting for this one phone to ring if one of the agents out there have a problem. And it's, it's kind of a funny parallel to this. It's like, what's on fire? How can we help you? One of the things I want to go to next is you create a lot of responsible information in this space, whether people use you or not. I try to create responsible information, whether people use me or not. I bought a practice from a dual representation broker twice. It was a big mistake. I wish I didn't do it, right? It cost me money and time. I hope someone does not do it. Now, someone recently reached out to me today and I said, hey, do you want to list your associate position on Dentist Job Connect? And they nicely said, we're talking to one candidate, Paul. So if it doesn't work out, we'll connect with you. And I had the courage, Brandon, to say to them, hey, you don't have to use me, but if you're only considering one candidate for the most important position in your office, you're making a mistake. You need to compare, you need to contrast. It may reinforce why you want to hire that one, but you're making a big mistake if you are only interviewing one person for your associate. I'm going to throw that back to you because you used the word optionality. What is the risk, the problem, the danger of just saying, oh, the DSO person came to my office, they seem nice, they say they're going to give me 10x EBITDA, that's the going rate, and I don't even need someone like you, Brandon, or I don't need people in your space to help me. Tell us about that risk.
So one of the myths I was going to touch on is, hey, I have a buyer, I don't need a broker, right? The reality is, if you own a large, successful practice in an attractive geography, you are getting likely inundated by direct mail, maybe solicitations from your colleagues that have sold to DSOs. Their goal is for you not to have optionality,
right,
and get a proprietary lead, because at the end of the day, their responsibility is to their investors. Buy low, sell high. And if they don't have competition, they know they don't have to put their best foot forward from a valuation perspective. So you've got to create optionality for multiple reasons. One, to drive economics, right? You've got to have competition, multiple bids to create leverage to negotiate a better outcome economically. But even more important than that is fit and deal structure. Fit and deal structure are more important than the initial valuation. You're not going anywhere. You're going to be there for 3 to 5 years post-sale. You've got to make sure that you partner with the right DSO for your particular practice. And just because one DSO was the right fit for your buddy down the street, it might not be the best fit for you. You have different practices. You're at a different stage in life. different season in your career. You have different goals, a different why. So you might end up selling to the same DSO that your buddy did, but in order to have proper perspective, you got to date around. You've got to field multiple offers. And ultimately, even if you sell to that same DSO that was already at the table, if you've done it right and created leverage, created competition, created optionality, you're going to sell for 20 to 30% more than they would offer if you were entertaining an unsolicited offer. So in order to have proper perspective, you've got to date around. Every DSO is different. If you've met one, you've met one. Fit and deal structure are more important than the initial valuation. We already kind of talked about why fit's so important. Let's talk about why deal structure is so important. You're going to have an equity component, typically a sizable equity component in every single one of these deals. So most DSO deals are going to involve cash at close, 60 to 70%, and then an equity component, whether that be holding company equity in the DSO or practice level joint venture equity. That equity, if you partner with the right DSO that reaches a recap event and accomplishes their financial goals, the sale of that equity, that second bite of the apple, could be as significant or more significant than the initial bite of the apple, the cash at close. So picking the right partner that is set up in a way to be sustainable and successful long-term is critically important from an economic perspective, because you want to get to that second bite of the apple. That could be a substantial economic windfall.
Walk me through that a little bit more. I'm learning myself through these awesome webinars. You have enterprise value of $3 million. Someone gives you $2 million. They can't take that away from you, right? I mean, you have the $2 million. You put it in your bank. I mean, actually, is clawback still popular or not popular?
They're not super popular. They went away post-COVID because the market got so hot. There was so much demand. But again, clawbacks are something that could be in your deal if you don't create competition and have optionality, because you have no leverage to negotiate holdbacks, earnouts, clawbacks away. But yes, typically the cash at close is protected. That belongs to you.
So now I'm Paul Goodman. I have $1 million, right? And I think this is so valuable. You take, because this is the deal, sir. I take this $1 million, I put it in the holding company. In a very good outcome, what happens to that $1 million in the holding company? And not the grand slam, but in a very good outcome, what happens to that $1 million?
Good outcome, considering the current macroeconomic conditions, a 3x return on equity over a 5-year recap cycle would be a strong outcome. That's normally what we map out when we do the financial modeling with our clients. Now, if you're entering in year 1 of a 5-year recap cycle, that's what you're shooting for, a 3x return. If you partner with that DSO in year 4 of a 5-year recap cycle, your return on that equity is going to be muted because you have a shorter hold time until you get to that liquidity event compared to your peer that partnered with that DSO years earlier.
And to walk everyone through that, in that example of my office, you get $2 million, you keep $1 million in, that's another $3 million, you're up to $5 million. And then over that 5 years, you're also earning money as a high-level associate in your own practice. Because what I would assume, they need to come up with a term, Brannon, maybe you and I can invent it, for the associate in the DSO, right? Because an associate in my practice is not cut in on the profits, right? And an associate in DSO is that accurate to say?
Actually, I mean, it depends. If the associate is a former owner.
Yeah, yes, I'm saying the former owner, yes.
If they're a former owner and they either have holding company equity or joint venture practice level equity, they are sharing in the profits. If it's joint venture equity, they're sharing in the profits daily on an ongoing basis because they actually own a piece of their own business.
Yeah.
If they hold holding company stock, they're sharing in the profit of their business and all the businesses within the group, but only when you get to the recap. So in a holding company model, you're definitely betting everything on the recap, as opposed to a joint venture model where you still own equity in your own business and you get a pro rata share of EBITDA along the way. But to go back, and that's the big difference between holding company equity and joint venture equity. JV equity, equity in your own business, you're going to continue to receive an ongoing profit stream. because you still own equity at the practice level comparative to a holding company model where you only own stock in the parent company of the DSO. I want to make sure that the audience got the full picture of what we just described. Your business was worth $3 million at close. You took $2 million cash at close. You rolled over $1 million of value into holding company stock. And then in 4 years, you hit a recapitalization event at a 3x return. So that $1 million you invested in holding company stock now worth $3 million. You got the $2 million cash at close. You now have $5 million in a 4 or 5 year window. Comparative to that same practice, maybe selling to a private buyer for $1.5 million on a good day, $2 million.
Yeah. And just it sounds to me from what you described, the JV equity has more reward, but there must be more risk somewhere in there.
Less upside on the equity, but you have the ongoing EBITDA distributions that I think lower risk, in the sense that if that recap doesn't come, or if the return's muted, or if it takes longer to get there, at least I'm getting a piece of the pie along the way.
Yeah.
As opposed to betting everything on the comp.
It's also probably this is probably what you're saying, is that it's the personality of the practice owner, because the personality of the practice owner maybe really want to dig in and grow and see that as they grow, they're getting more. So what other myths did you want to share with our audience? We talked about deal structure, we talked about fit, talked about the bigger the number doesn't always mean the better the deal, but what other myths about the DSO? One of our people had asked here about what happens to the team. Does the DSO come in and fire your team immediately?
No, so DSOs are actually super sensitive to doctor and staff turnover. They're going to make you tell your team before they wire the money into your bank account. And if your team exits, if there's key providers that exit or key team members that exit, it's going to cause a problem. They are very, very sensitive to making sure that for your associates, for your staff, it's same or better post-affiliation as it was pre-affiliation. Again, go back to what I said before, but the easiest way to burn their investment to the ground is to piss you or your staff off. Because if they upset you, you're not going to work as hard, incentives aren't going to be aligned, and ultimately the practice is going to suffer financially as a result. The other thing I want to touch on, because this is coming up more and more and more, number of locations does not equal a higher valuation. A lot of people think that DSOs are focused on buying a 5, 10, 15 location practice. That's really what they're looking for. They're really looking for EBITDA. More locations comes with typically more overhead and lower EBITDA. So you might trade for a slightly higher EBITDA multiple, but from a valuation perspective, I would much rather work with a 2 location practice with top line revenue of 5 million and an EBITDA of 1.5 million than a 5 location practice with top line revenue of 5 million and only $1 million in EBITDA. The 2 location example is going to sell for a lot higher valuation than the 5 location example. So number of locations does not typically result, a higher number of locations does not typically result in a higher valuation. I can't tell you how many times I get the call where I'm like, all right, well, tell me about your practice. How many locations do you have? I have 7. All right, awesome. Now I'm getting excited. What's your revenue? 6 million.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, your EBITDA margin is going to suck.
And I think we just helped somebody, and I've been guilty of this myself, of, the wide-eyed, oh, I'm going to buy that $500,000 practice 14 miles away and transform it. And sometimes you can do it, but then sometimes it really actually hampers your core practice or your core practices. So basically, if you're probably not going to go back and go to dental school, Brannon, but if you were giving people advice, you would say, don't just buy extra practices to have extra practices. It can have the opposite effect on your EBITDA, and I will share as a multi-practice owner, your sanity.
Every time I meet with a practice owner that has a badass, 1 or 2 location practice, high EBITDA, and they're like, hey, by the way, I'm starting a practice here. I'm like, I'm going to mark on my calendar. I'm like, when's it going to open? I'm going to mark on my calendar 6 months after they open the doors. I'm going to call them. And there's a strong likelihood that they're going to want to have a conversation about selling the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because that third office, took an exponential amount of work to get off the ground, and they can't be 3 places at once.
One of my favorite jokes by Jim Gaffigan, one of my favorite comedians, said he has 5 children. He goes, no one congratulates you when you have a fourth baby. Having a fourth baby is like drowning in the ocean and someone throwing you a baby. And it's pretty much a very similar thing for practice owners. So that's good. How about as we're going to go to the top 5 mistakes, but tell us about this. It's part of my world daily, both as a practice owner and with Dentist Job Connect. Whether you want to call it the role of the associate, having associates, we start with something easy. Do some DSOs require associates to be on board for acquisitions?
There are some specialty focused DSOs that are very hesitant to buy a one doctor practice because specialists are harder to find. There's less of them. So there's definitely more key man risk in specialty practices, particularly endo, perio, and MS. From a general dentistry practice perspective, we work with plenty of one doctor offices, but key man risk is a big talking point with DSOs. So bifurcating the production among multiple providers and reducing your key man risk is a key to maximizing demand and marketability. A practice that's owned by a younger provider and or a practice that has multiple providers is typically going to trade for a higher multiple than a practice that's owned by an older doctor or a single doctor practice.
I like that. And, people, it's a good quote. People, I learn more from my mistakes than my successes. I've learned more from my failures when I was, flat on my face. I think some of that has that Hollywood movie rah-rah stuff. But why can't we learn from people who are role modeling something right? Do I always have to make a mistake? Can't I just look at someone and say, oh, they're doing something well, I would like to do it well? So I want to ask you this, as someone who has associates, could happen to me one day. What do good practice owners do when they tell their associates they're going to partner with the DSO, so the associate doesn't run out the door? Because it could be way more feelings than facts. I don't know if you met a dentist, Brannon, very emotional people. So tell us, what does a good practice owner do when they're thinking about and going to partner with a DSO? How do they tell their associates so they stay on board?
It's a delicate conversation. And look, it just got more delicate as of yesterday with the FTC ruling.
Yeah.
We won't get into the whole non-compete thing, but if you have key providers in your practice, associates that have been with you a while, they're strong producers, the DSO is going to be sensitive to the continuity of the collections. And a lot of that's predicated upon those doctors staying on. So one, explaining that it's a partnership, that you're not going anywhere, that you want life for them to be sane or better. Two, a lot of the DSOs have some sort of on-ramp to equity for associates, whether that be joint venture equity or holding company equity. And then three, in certain situations, we have had owners, offer to pay some type of retention bonus to their associates. Hey, this is what I'm doing. I want you here. They want you here. Your pay is going to be the same. Your benefits are going to be the same. And if you agree to stay on for 2 years, post affiliation, at that 2-year mark, I'll give you $100 grand or $200 grand. It depends on the size of the transaction and how important that particular provider is. But again, some instances we have had clients with their own money or in part with the DSO's money put together some type of incentive package to keep key providers on long term.
I have a great answer, and also share someone who owns multiple businesses and done this, whether it's actually someone who wanted to buy my dental nachos business or dental practice. I would say to my team, especially if I was still going to be there, right, Brandon, especially if I'm be there, say, why don't you just try it with the new owners? You know these people, you know the patients, you have this opportunity to elevate yourself in your organization and become special. So before you run out the door, why don't you try it with the new owners? I'm going to be here too. I don't know if you think that's a good tone to take, but
no, I think that is a proper stance to take. Look, it's just like selling a private practice to another doctor and what you communicate to your patients, right? It's like, look, yes, I'm retiring, I'm leaving, but I've got this bright young girl or guy that's, going to take great care of you. You know where I'm located. You know we take your insurance. You know our team. What's your alternative? Your alternative is to go to the great unknown. At least give the new doctor a shot. And that's why patient retention is so high in practice transitions, even if we're talking about a full fee-for-service practice, so long as the fit is right between
I
buyer
mean,
and
my
seller.
take home is stay with familiarity unless it becomes a problem. It could be a Dental Nachos, Dentist Job Connect, your business, dental offices. If you have a team, just say, hey, see, you know the people, you know your job. And kind of what you said before, and we can have a whole nother webinar on this, is there could be unique opportunities for these associates dentists to grow inside the organization and create a ownership life that looks different than what maybe they thought from dental school, but also could be very attractive without them having to be 100% owners. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and look, we tell our clients, before we even go to market and start talking to buyers, the most trepidation you're probably going to feel in this process is the morning you're driving to the office to tell your team and tell the doctors. And you might tell the doctors or a couple of key team members first before you tell the rest of the team. But that is probably going to be the most stress that you're going to experience during this process. But if the narrative's succinct, if you're confident and you've picked the right partner, it typically goes far better than you would expect.
Yeah, I like that. Well, let's wrap up with kind of this fun lightning rounders thing on, let's go back to what dentists love, man, and mistakes, stuff going wrong, stepping in ditches, stuck in ditches, losing everything. So give me Brannon Moncrief's top 5 mistakes dentists make when pursuing a DSO affiliation.
Already talked about a lot of them. I'd say, number one is not having proper representation.
Yeah.
Not having a dream team behind you that has navigated these waters many, many times. You don't know what you don't know. And we've been down this road. We know the tricks of the trade. A couple of the partners in our company, I recruited from the buy side. They were actually DSO buyers, and I invited them to come join my team and sit on the sell side. Who better to have on your team than somebody that sat on the other side of the table? So not having proper representation, responding to an unsolicited offer, right? You're going to leave at least one turn of EBITDA on the table and run the risk of selling to the wrong DSO if you don't entertain multiple bids. So failure to create competition for your practice is another big one. And then that leads to, potentially selling to the wrong DSO, or I'll also touch on, potentially selling prematurely, right? Or maybe a DSO wasn't the right fit for you based on how your practice is engineered and your why. So we like to provide objective guidance, and we spend as much time encouraging people to go down the DSO path as we do encouraging them to just stay the course and sell to a private buyer when they're ready to exit their business.
I think I'll share. You can go to the next one in a second. I just want to interject. If your practice collects a certain amount of money, it's responsible to explore all reasonable practice sale opportunities. We tell our patients, we want to give you a treatment plan that has the best options for the health of your mouth. And if, it sounds like right now in this world, at this moment, with us two talking, if it's $1.5 million, it's just a guidepost, right? A lot of people bring a lot more than 1.5 million, and they don't realize that they have these practices that are really fantastic, but could be nearly impossible to sell to a private practice buyer. And they want to stop practicing dentistry, Brandon, in the next 4 years. So hopefully we have shocked them into paying attention. But I stopped you. I know you did 3 there.
Oh, no, I mean, it's a good point. You owe it to yourself. I mean, for most dentists, this is one of their most valuable assets and one of their most prized possessions. You owe it to yourself to explore all options, but you got to make sure you got the right people in the bus. You've got the right advisors that are giving you purely objective advice with no regard for themselves. And those are the types of advisors that you need on your team. The last one is not controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA. If you give your numbers to 3 different accountants, you'll get 3 different EBITDA figures. If you give your numbers to 3 different DSOs, you'll get 3 different EBITDA figures. Manipulating EBITDA is the number one way that DSOs manipulate sellers. And EBITDA matters far more than the multiple. Every dollar in EBITDA is worth $7 to $10 in value. So ensuring that you're getting credit for all the add backs that you deserve, eliminating all the discretionary expenses and personal expenses and non-recurring expenses, and not allowing the DSO to play games with your EBITDA. I mean, I'd say that's really where we earn our keep, and controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA and creating optionality. So you got to make sure that you have someone who understands your EBITDA and that's in the position to defend it throughout the process.
I think that's so key. And, that's why we should all just have this kind of funny joke, like accountants can't agree on EBITDA, dentists can't agree on a treatment plan. I went to a broker conference once. That was so much fun. There was a project, all the brokers got together and there was a real deal, Brannon, and you had to play a game and your group had to come up with what it sold for and all the stuff. Freaking, it was all over the map, right? From people who did this every day. So instead of criticizing, you say you disagree with dentists on treatment plans, people are going to disagree on your EBITDA, have someone like you on your side to let you know what's normal, because I'm assuming that you have made dentists quite a bit of money by making sure they were getting the best EBITDA number for their practice. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to quantify it, I mean, if a DSO is undercutting you on the multiple and your EBITDA, right? And if we come into the picture and we increase EBITDA by 200 grand and then increase the multiple by a turn, we just made you $2 million. And I could tell that story over and over and over again.
I really like that. I want to share. We're going to talk for a few more minutes, a few more questions, but people can scan this QR code. I've actually never figured out how to scan a QR code on my phone. Someone could tell me, let me know. I take pictures. So my team will put the actual link in the chat for this QR code. When people scan this, Brandon, and check in with you, do they have a conversation? Do you guys jump on Zoom? How's the process work?
A Zoom call or phone call, reach out and schedule what we call a discovery call, very casual, confidential, get to know each other. We'll talk a little bit about your why, talk a little bit about the characteristics of your practice, and see if it makes sense to do a deep dive and do a valuation and go through the process of quantifying EBITDA and valuation, a lot of times through the lens of both a private buyer and a DSO buyer. We can even do some economic modeling to show you, how would each of those scenarios play out under different deal structures and different valuations over a 5-year period of time. So we always start with the discovery call, then valuation, talk options, and figure out, is now the right time to take the practice to market? And if so, what route is the proper course of action?
Yeah, well, I can't thank you enough for kind of leading us with learning. I mean, these webinars are about learning. There's opportunities to connect with both of us. I encourage people watching in now, listening later. People have said thanks for the information. It's very informative, great information here. But this is pretty much the biggest or second biggest decision of your entire career. Don't make it without the right people. I cannot echo enough, Brandon, and I wish I had it. You need the right team on your side, including what you do, and attorneys and accountants. Because maybe I'll just, in a fun question is like, from someone talking to you, right, to them closing, what timelines can people expect? I know some have been 32 months and I know some have been 3 months, but as a broker, I found out it was longer to sell practice than I thought before I was a broker. So if you're just kind of saying, hey, from the first time you guys jump on Zoom to them having that drive to the practice to inform their team, what timeline are you usually thinking about with people?
It really depends on what timeline you're on. But I mean, if you were ready to do this and go to market tomorrow, you're talking 5 to 6 months from start to finish, whether you're selling to a private buyer or a DSO. But many of our clients, I mean, these are 3, 5, 7-year relationships before it's actually time to take the asset to market. So we are very unique in the sense that we soft sell, we don't rush our clients to market. If it makes sense to wait, we're going to advise you to wait. We want to go to market when you're ready and when the practice is as valuable and marketable as possible.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, there's probably times, I mean, it might be just as very simplistic, but you tell some of your clients, hey, you should go back and do this before you sell to make sure, whether it's negotiating insurance fees, whether it's working on something, because there's probably opportunities for them to go back and make their practice as attractive as possible. And that's, I want to say, so some of these people you're meeting 3, 4, 5 years prior to this sale.
If you are within 5 years of monetizing your business, you need to know your EBITDA right now. You need to do evaluation right now to talk about what mistakes to avoid, but also enhancements that you can make to your practice to make it more valuable and more marketable. So we'd love to have the conversation early. We'll do the valuation now, and then we'll update it at no cost when the time comes to go to market.
Well, you've convinced me, Brandon. So I'm just going to wear this shirt every day here. It says biceps and EBITDA. So I'm going to wear it every day. Well, I'm going to go off Facebook Live for a second. We'll talk here. Thanks so much for sharing with me. Really appreciate it.
Paul, good to see you.